The 2024 African Economic Conference is expected to get underway in Botswana's capital, Gaborone. The three-day gathering is hosted by the African Development Bank, the United Nations Development Programme and the UN Commission for Africa. It's held under the theme Securing Africa's Economic Future Amidst Rising Uncertainty. SABC News reporter Kylie Kumalo joins us now. A very good morning to you, Kaya. Thank you so much for joining us. Just take us through the significance of this gathering in Botswana, especially after the country saw a smooth transition in the recent elections.
Well, undoubtedly, Simpio, it's quite a very pivotal moment for Botswana as it's hosting this very all-important conference. So it's all about seeking those solutions, really, amid all these challenges. And Africa obviously finding itself really just really in the eye of the storm, so to speak. And obviously, we do understand it's 8 o'clock. That's when Botswana's President Duma Botgo is going to officially open this conference, where a myriad of issues will be discussed, looking at issues around economic volatility, but also looking at other geopolitical challenges, for example, the wars, the instability, but really, Simpio, to really just give us more lowdown in terms of the expectations. Joining us now is Professor Orama. Of course, he's with the African Development Bank. So, Prof, once again, looking at the significance of this conference, obviously with a number of challenges facing the African continent, the wars, climate change, and so many other challenges as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Today we are going to be opening the African Economic Conference organized by the African Development Bank, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and also the United Nations Development Programme. We're coming together to try and look for Africa-led solutions for these challenges that Africa keeps facing. As you have mentioned, the theme of the conference is on securing Africa's economic futures amid rising global uncertainties. We have several types of uncertainties, from pandemics, from geopolitical tensions, from trade tensions, but also from regional and global conflicts that we are seeing. And it is important for Africans to come together to think about solutions that are homegrown. Solutions like looking back home on using Africa's capital to work for Africa's development. How we can mobilize domestic revenue from Africa within the continent to meet the fiscal challenges that continues to balloon on the continent. How to find solutions to Africa's debt and recurring debt vulnerability challenges, but also how to use the teeming populations of youth in terms of human capital, youths and women in Africa, in order to be able to spur sustainable development on the continent. That's quite a plethora of things we are going to be looking at, also including digitization and technology, how we can use that to unlock value in our natural capital in order to be able to make that capital work for Africa's development. Gone are the days when Africa will continue to look outside for solutions. This time we want to look inwards and see what Africa can do for Africans in Africa.
And once again, Prof, I mean, there was a time where the phrase African solutions for the African problems, it was fairly popular in the continent, and I suppose you're going back there. But let's look at, for example, issues around the reforms of the global financial institutions. I mean, this has been a talking point for some time, where so many African nations are really battling with the debt crisis and really affecting social expenditure and many other key priorities.
Yes, the reform of the global financial architecture is a must, because the architecture that drives global financial transactions today, including financial flows, were crafted in the post-World War era. Africa was not on the table when that happened. So we need to make that global financial architecture more nimble, more inclusive, and more affordable for developing countries, including African countries. As you have mentioned, the challenges of debt in Africa has a lot of exogenous drivers. We have a lot of perceptions of risk in Africa, which makes the cost of capital just inordinately expensive. So we have to have a relook on how Africa can come up with its own credit rating agency in order to provide data and be able to engage with the global rating agencies to make Africa's sovereign ratings more realistic, meeting, so that we're no longer spending so much resources because of the high cost of capital due to perceptions of risks. We also need to look at how Africa can reform itself in terms of its economic governance principles in order to be able to focus on local solutions, as I've mentioned, to drive Africa's development. You will agree with me that Africa is a very rich continent. We are rich in natural capital, we are rich in human capital, we are rich in culture, we are rich in social capital, and everything it takes to make development happen. What we need to do is to see how to unlock these values and improve our participation in the global value chain so that we'll be able to mobilize sufficient capital for Africa's development. And again, as I've mentioned, there is no solution, no alternative to sound economic governance like we're seeing in Botswana and in some of the African countries that are moving up in terms of their GDP per capita and addressing poverty and other issues, because Africa as a continent continues to lose huge amounts of resources on illicit financial flows, in tax misinvoicing, in profit shifting in global markets, and so on, because of poor legislation and governance across several African countries. So this is also something we are going to be looking into to see how we can learn from good examples within the African continent, but also outside the African continent, to come up with better, sound, homegrown macroeconomic principles and policies that will help to unlock Africa's capital, but also retain that capital within the continent to stem the capital flight we have been seeing.
Prof, thank you so much indeed for your time. So obviously, that's a very key mantra here. It's very solution-driven. So with that, back to you in Johannesburg.
All right, Khayelihle, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your update. Khayelihle Khumalo, they speaking to us live from Gaborone in Botswana.